In the soft hush of morning, before the sun has fully climbed above the flat rooftops of the city of yore, a young potter stirs from sleep. His home is modest made of baked mud bricks. The walls cool to the touch, the interior shaded and dim. A woven mat rests beneath him, and beside it a clay jug holds yesterday's water. Warm and faintly dusty, the air carries the scent of reed mats, of clay, and a distant Thames of livestock. Outside, the city is slowly waking. Footsteps echo softly against the stone walkways. Someone sweeps rhythmically with a date palm broom. Farther away, a woman pours water into a basin. It splashes, muffled by the stillness of morning dot. Our potter rises and folds his sleeping mat. He moves slowly, deliberately, as if every motion belongs to a larger rhythm, one shaped by the land. Overhead, roofs stretch outward, providing a canopy of shade. The city is built from warm earth tone ochres, faded reds, and the pale yellow of sun-baked clay. Yore, like other Sumerian cities, is a place of layers. Homes are clustered tightly together, some 2 stories tall. Upper rooms are reached by staircases that wind like ribbons. Rooftops serve as living spaces, as places to dry fish or grain, to gaze quietly at the stars in the hush of evening dot water is precious. Canals run like narrow veins through the city, bringing life from the great river, the Euphrates. Men carry jars to and from these canals. The clay cool against their hips. The potter walks toward the workshop. It is shared, as most are, he greets. Others, not with words, but with nods and soft eye contact. The kilns are still, for now. Clay is laid out in baskets, covered with damp cloth. Before work begins, he visits the temple. It is a simple octopause at the courtyard of Ninmah, the moon god. He bows, leaves a pinch of grain, and whispers a blessing. The temple rises gently above the city, its ziggurat shape like a stairway to the faded sky. And then he begins. The day unfolds slowly. Clay is soaked, shaped, spun, smoothed. Every bowl, every jar, every tablet has a purpose. Some will hold water, others oil. Some will carry messages pressed in wedge-shaped cuneiform, baked into permanence. There is no rush. The sun moves overhead, and the heat presses downward. In the shade, they pause. Bread is shared. Dates, soft and sweet, are eaten in silence. Children run past, laughing in the dust. A priest walks by, robes swaying, his steps measured and soft as dusk settles. Fires are lit. A breeze rises from the river, carrying with it the scent of damp earth of fish, and the distant hum of frogs. The potter returns home. He washes with cool water, eats a simple stew with his family, and climbs to the roof. There, under the stars, he watches the night drift in. He sees Venus a bright pinpoint end, thinks of Inanna, the goddess of love and war. And then he sleeps. Let us now drift onward. Let us drift slowly into the mythic realm of the Ennu, N-A-K-I, in the ancient lands of Mesopotamia where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers wove through deserts. And marshlands, people told stories of divine beings who shaped the earth, governed the skies, and whispered secrets into the wind. They were called the Anunnaki, a word that echoes like an ancient spell, those who came from the heavens. To the Sumerians, they were not merely gods. They were a divine council, ancient beyond time, eternal witnesses to the rise and fall of humanity. Some myths say they came from the heavens to shape the earth. Others say they were born of the primordial gods and Enki, heaven and earth woven together at the dawn of creation. But their names are what carry weight across the sands of memory. E-N-L-I-L, Lord of the air first. Enlil, his name means Lord Wind, and he was the god of storms, breath, and the invisible powers that shape destinies. His temper was legendary. Enlil once released a flood to wipe away humankind, tired of their noise. In many stories, he holds the tablets of destiny, the power to determine fate itself. But Enlil was not purely wrathful. He was also a god of order, of structure, of law. In some ways, he resembles Zeus of the Greeks or Yahweh of early Hebrew text figures of supreme authority, whose words shaped the laws of mortals. Enki, Lord of waters and wisdom. Then there was Enki, the god of fresh water, magic, knowledge, and life. He lived in the Abzu, the underground sea, and was known for his kindness. While Enlil brought storms, Enki brought balance. It was he who saved humanity during the Great Flood by whispering warnings to a mortal man. You might say he was the Prometheus of Sumerian lore, bringing forbidden knowledge, protecting humanity, and sometimes bending divine rules for the sake of compassion. He crafted humans from clay, breathed into them the spirit of life, and taught them how to farm, how to build, how to dream. Inanna, queen of heaven, and then there was Inanna, goddess of love and war, of beauty and chaos, of fertility and vengeance, a goddess of contradictions, and yet, perhaps, the most human of them all. She descends into the underworld in search of power, stripping away her garments at each gate, until she stands naked before her sister, facing death. Inanna evokes the energy of Isis in Egypt, or Aphrodite in Greece, but sharper, bolder. She is not merely desired, she desires. She does not only receive love, she makes war to the people of ancient Mesopotamia. Her myths were not gentle tales. They were raw, intense, vibrant with the pulse of life itself. Together, these gods, alongside others like Ninhursag, Utu, and Nunhoft, a pantheon of balance and tension. Some were guardians of light, others of shadow. They met in heavenly assembly to decide the fates of mortals and kings. Unlike the more familiar gods of Mount Olympus, who often acted out of impulse, the Anunnaki were more distant, more ceremonial, less whimsical. They mirrored the order and ritual of early Mesopotamian civilization. Priest-kings, temple records, offerings arranged with care. They were gods to be respected, not befriended, feared yet trusted. When you look across time, you can see shadows of the Anunnaki in other traditions. In ancient Egypt, you find divine councils to gods like Ra, Thoth, and Osiris, each with specific roles. Yet, Egyptian gods often had more defined domains: day and night, life and death, sky and earth. The Greeks brought emotion into their gods. Zeus raged, Hera plotted, Dionysus danced and drank. The Anunnaki, by contrast, felt older, as if they were forces rather than personalities. The Greek gods were passionate. The Anunnaki were elemental. In early Jewish scripture, the presence of a divine council also lingers. The book of Genesis refers to "let us make man in our image," echoing the idea of multiple divine beings acting in unisona, whisper from Mesopotamian myth, still breathing beneath newer texts to the Sumerians. The Anunnaki weren't just remembered, they were invoked, names carved into clay tablets, statues dressed in robes, temples with inner chambers where only the high priest could speak to the gods. The ziggurat, those towering step temples, rose toward the heavens like mountains built by human hands to bring the gods closer, to offer grain, beer, or song. Every ritual, every gesture was a way to remember the Anunnaki, to invite them back into the world. But time passed, languages changed, empires fell. The sands covered the temples, and the Anunnaki faded into shadow. Or did they? Some say the Anunnaki never left, that they were never gods in the first place, but visitors. There's a theory, a strange and quiet one, that the Anunnaki were not myth, but beings from the stars. ancient astronauts who came to Earth long ago and were mistaken for gods by early humans. Their knowledge of agriculture, architecture, astronomy was so advanced, so beyond understanding, that it became divine in the eyes of those who saw it. Did they teach us to write, to build, to rule? Did they mine the earth for resources and create humans as workers? Or are these just stories born of wonder and late-night dreams? The clay tablets are silent, the ziggurats crumble, but the stories remain. Tonight, as you listen to this story, perhaps you are not just hearing myth. Perhaps you are touching a thread that stretches through time, through kings and scribes, through temples and rituals, through questions whispered beneath stars. The Anunnaki were not just gods, they were memory made real, and memory, as we know, never fully disappears. It only waits for someone to remember. Across the Mesopotamian skies, beneath the starlit silence, names began to shimmer, each carrying the weight of divine purpose. Enlil, Lord of the Air, the Stormbringer. He was not merely a god of weather, but a cosmic administrator. It was Enlil who separated heaven from earth, who held the tablet of destinies, who could raise kings and wash away empires with floods. His presence was vast, and his moods dangerous. In stories, he is the one who unleashed the great flood to quiet humanity, whose noise had grown intolerable to the gods. Then there was Enki, his brother, Enki of the sweet waters, Enki of wisdom, trickster, healer, protector. Where Enlil was stern, Enki was sly yet compassionate. It was Enki who defied the divine council to warn humans of the coming deluge. In the city of Erud, where the waters met the land, his temples shimmered like mirages. Enki was not only a god, but a bridge between the divine and the mortal, between destruction and survival. And what of Inanna? She, who would later become known as Ishtar, the queen of heaven, a goddess of love and war, desire and death. Inanna was radiant and terrifying. She descended into the underworld, not with fear, but with fury, demanding entrance. Her myth is among the earliest known stories of resurrection. When she returned, the world changed. Spring came again. These were not simple gods of wind, rain, or the harvest. The Anunnaki were like living metaphors, representations of all that was unpredictable, powerful, and divine in the world. In this way, the Anunnaki reflected an entire philosophy of existence. Divinity wasn't distant. It was messy, beautiful, conflicted, and dangerously close. Across the river Nile, the Egyptians would build their own celestial family. Gods like Osiris and Isis, Anubis and Thoth. But here too, echoes of the Anunnaki lingered, a divine brotherhood, a sacred flood, the judgment of souls. It was as if the gods had learned to wear new names and masks, but told the same stories. In Greece, Zeus reigned from Olympus, much like Enlil from his mountain. Prometheus, a kind of Enki, stole fire for humankind. And Aphrodite, beautiful and terrible, bore in Anna's contradictions. Even the early Hebrew texts whispered old truths of floods, of towers reaching heaven, of angels descending to mix with mankind. Stories that sound, to some ears, like distorted memories of the Anu and Enki. And so the Anunnaki were not just remembered. They were transformed, reshaped by generations of telling and forgetting. Their myths bled into temples and Torahs, scrolls and psalms. But memory is a strange thing. Over centuries, the gods fell silent. Or so it seemed, until, in modern times, a strange revival began. There were those who wondered, what if the Anunnaki were not gods, but visitors, not divine beings from a spiritual realm, but something else, something older, from beyond? This idea, often called the ancient astronaut theory, suggests that the myths of gods descending from the sky, with knowledge and power, could be more literal than we thought. That the Anunnaki were not imagined, but remembered stories of Enki engineering humanity, of gods descending in fire and storm, began to sound like, perhaps, visitations. The temples, with their impossible carvings and towering ziggurats, became something to question. Were they shrines or landing sites? It is not a theory taken seriously by many scholars, and yet the idea has taken root in the cultural imagination. In books, documentaries, and long midnight conversations, there's something compelling about it. Not in its proof, but in its poetry, because maybe, deep down, we don't care whether the Anunnaki were gods, aliens, or something else entirely. Maybe. What matters is that they were remembered at all, that thousands of years ago, on a strip of land between two rivers, humans looked at the stars and told stories. Grand stories, dangerous stories. Stories full of storms and love, betrayal and mercy. Stories to explain the flood, the fire, the first breath of life. And those stories, like gentle rivers, still flow, even now, in the quiet of our sleep. Now, let us walk together through the narrow alleyways of a real Sumerian city. The air is thick with dust, not from speeding carts or traffic, but from the dry Mesopotamian winds, stirring up centuries of baked mud and clay beneath your feet. You squint through the midday haze. The sun hangs lazily in the sky, its heat pushing down with steady insistence. The buildings around you, squat, square, and featureless, are made of mud brick, a material cheap and efficient, but far from luxurious. Cracks run through their walls, patched here and there with straw and dried reeds. There is no glass in the windows. In fact, windows are small slits, if present at all, meant more for ventilation than for viewing. Light filters dimly into the homes, but it brings with it flies, dust, and the constant odor of life in a crowded city with no sewers in the street. You hear it all. The bleating of goats, the clatter of wooden sandals, children playing in the distance, shouting in a language forgotten by time. Merchants cry out from their stalls, offering barley, cakes, and fish, salted, dried, or freshly caught from the nearby Euphrates. The fish, naturally, have begun to smell by midday. Everywhere. People are doing ... something. There is no concept of leisure as we know it. Women knead bread and spin wool. Men carry jugs of water or haul bundles of reeds on their shoulders. Slaves, indistinguishable by dress, but never by posture, move quickly and quietly. The scent of burning bitumen, the black, sticky tar used in construction, is never far from your nose. And if you are of lower status, you live without privacy. Your house, if you can call it that, is likely one room shared with your entire family. You sleep on woven mats or directly on the floor if you're unlucky. The walls ooze dampness during the winter rains, and in the summer they trap the heat like an oven. The bathroom, a ceramic pot emptied into the street's open drain, where human and animal waste flows past your front door. Sleep here is not peaceful, it's a negotiation. You lie on your back, swatting mosquitoes in the humid nights, listening to donkeys bray and dogs bark. In the rainy season, the streets turn to muck, thick and foul. In the dry months, they crack like old pottery. Either way, the smell lingers. At the heart of the city stands the ziggurat, a massive, tiered temple dedicated to the city's patron deity. It towers above the homes like a great stairway to the gods, its summit veiled in incense smoke and mystery. If you're among the elite, you may visit the temple courts. You may bring offerings, exchange prayers for protection. But if you're a commoner, you might only glimpse it from afar, from the roof of your humble home, as it glows orange in the evening sun. And on that rooftop, you may sleep. Yes, most people sleep on their rooftops, especially in the hotter months. The night sky above you is vast and strange. No city lights to blur the stars. You might see the Milky Way stretch from horizon to horizon. You may see Mars, red and patient. You may wonder about the stories of the gods and about the shadows in the dark dot. Now and then, someone in your family falls ill. There are no hospitals. Priests offer incense and murmur incantations. Herbalists grind roots. Perhaps a healing spell will work. But more often, the fever takes its course. Death is never far. You hear of a neighbor's child who didn't wake up. You see old men stumble and collapse in the streets. There are no graveyards. Outside the city, people bury their dead under the floors of their homes. They sleep above them night after night, and yet this world is not without joy. Festivals brighten the calendar. When the moon is right and the barley has been harvested, people gather in the temple courtyards. Music rings out, flutes, lyres, drums. Dancers sway in lines, hands joined. The beer flows freely, thick, dark, drunk through long reed straws from communal jars. For a brief moment, even the poorest man can feel like a king. And in the firelight, stories are told of gods who loved, who fought, who created the world from chaos. The myths matter. They are not entertainment. They are truth. They tell people where they came from, why there is rain and drought and war and love, why death exists, why crops fail. The stories of Enlil, of Inanna, of Enki, and Ninmah, which is then dried and stacked and stored in dark corners of temples and homes, and every morning life resumes. The baker kneads his dough. The potter throws his clay. The scribes return to their tablets. The markets fill. The priests chant. The oxen plow the earth. And the children, barefoot and dusty, run between the cracks of this ancient city that never truly sleeps, yet never truly rests. Once, beneath the vast skies of Mesopotamia, temples rose from the dust-like mountains carved by mortal handsagrats of sun-baked brick, stacked in terraces reaching toward the heavens, as bridges between the divine and the earthly, where the breath of gods was believed to mingle with the smoke of offerings. This was the sacred stage, where humanity met the Nunnaki in the soft glow of dawn or the hush of evening. Priests would climb these temple steps with careful reverence, bearing sacrifices and incense to the gods they served. The rituals they performed were not just acts of devotion. They were negotiations, contracts, and attempts to maintain harmony in a universe where gods were powerful, fickle, and deeply entwined in every aspect of life. Let us linger a while in one of these ancient temples. Imagine the air thick with resinous incense, the low hum of prayers echoing from clay walls. The sacred space was dark, cool, and alive with quiet mystery. In the heart of the temple, the cell stood the idol of the god. It was not merely a statue, it was the god. The belief was firm and unshaken. Through elaborate rituals, the spirit of the deity inhabited the image. The god was present, watching, listening, demanding. Offerings were placed with care bowls of barley, dates, lambs, libations of beer or milk. Each item had meaning. Each gift had to be pleasing, lest the god grow restless. Priests softened hereditary. Elites trained from childhood memorized long hymns and incantations written in cuneiform. They purified themselves with water, donned ritual garments, and spoke the names of the Anunnaki as though naming them. Shaped reality itself. The lives of Mesopotamians followed a sacred rhythm: lunar festivals, harvest rites, New Year ceremonies. The Akichu festival, celebrated at the start of the new year, was among the most important. In this ritual drama, the story of creation was reenacted. Marduk, the storm god of Babylon, triumphed over chaos. Kings were stripped of their symbols, humbled, then re-enthroned as intermediaries between gods and men. It wasn't merely theater, it was a metaphysical renewal of cosmic order. Each rite, each prayer was believed to sustain me. The divine decrees the very fabric of the universe. Without them, the world could slide back into chaos over the centuries. As empires rose and fell, the temples crumbled. Sands swallowed their grandeur. The gods, once so feared and adored, faded from daily life. But some of their stories did not die. They take Inanna, goddess of love and war. Tale of descent into the underworld is one of the oldest known myths. Echoes of her story appear in the Greek Persephone, or even in Christian notions of descent and resurrection. Enlil, the lord of wind and storms, once the supreme god of the Sumerian pantheon, may have left a faint imprint in the Hebrew El, the name later associated with a monotheistic god. Enki, god of wisdom and fresh water, who saved humanity during the Great Flood by instructing Atrahasis, he be remembered in the figure of Prometheus or Noah, or the wise serpent of Eden. These parallels are not exact, but they whisper of shared human longings and anxieties about creation, justice, punishment, and salvation. In the stillness of the 20th century, new voices began to speak of the Anunnaki not as gods of grain and sky, but as beings from beyond the stars. The ancient astronaut theory, popularized by writers like Zecharia Sitchin, suggested that the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial visitors who seeded human civilization. According to these speculations, Sumerian texts were not religious metaphors, but literal accounts of alien engineers. In this view, Enki and Enlil were not deities, but rival scientists. The ziggurats were not temples, but launch pads. The myths were misunderstood histories. There is no scholarly consensus supporting such claims, and most historians and archaeologists firmly classify them as pseudoscience. Yet, the idea persists. It scratches at something deep, the feeling that the past is larger, stranger, and more complex than we are told. Whether taken literally or as modern mythology, the stories of the Anunnaki continue to evolve like constellations rearranging themselves in the night sky. So now we return once more to the temple. The fires have gone out. The priests have vanished. The idols are dust. But the stars overhead are the same in your mind's eye. You can still hear the ancient songs echoing through stone halls. You can still smell the myrrh in cedar. You can still feel the quiet awe of a people who looked into the unknown and called out to beings they hoped were listening. The Anunnaki may be gone, but in the bones of forgotten temples, in the myths reborn and reimagined, they are not silent. They linger in memory, in mystery, and perhaps in dreams. Some names echo not in the noisy halls of modern history, but in the dim corners of forgotten temples and whispered traditions. The Anunnaki are such names etched not only in stone tablets of Sumer, but in the veins of arcane teachings that thread through secret societies, mystical sects, and the fertile soil of symbolic imagination. In this chapter of the story, we step not through the gates of ancient cities, but into the inner sanctums of hidden knowledge. Let's begin with a slow breath, because what follows is less about facts and more about meaning. It is said that myth never truly dies, it only changes its face as Sumer faded and new empires rose. The names of the Anunnaki were sometimes forgotten, but the roles they played were not. The celestial orderers, the judges of fates, the gatekeepers of knowledge. We see their shadow in later mystic systems. In the Zohar, a core text of Jewish Kabbalah, there are discussions of 10 Sephiroth emanations of divine essence. Though unrelated directly, their function as intermediaries between the unknowable source and the material world echoes how the Anunnaki once stood between humans and the mysterious gods of the heavens. The number 7's so prevalent in Sumerian writings about the Anunnaki also permeates mystical systems across the world. 7 chakras in Eastern philosophy, 7 heavens in Islamic cosmology, 7 archangels in early Christian lore, coincidence. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Throughout the Middle Ages and well into the 19th century, certain occult orders and secret societies, such as the Rosicrucians and Hermetic alchemists, began weaving together threads of ancient Mesopotamian lore with their own symbolic systems. They believed that buried beneath the ruins of history was a primordial truth, one guarded and revealed only to the worthy. Some suggested that the Anunnaki were not simply gods, but archetypes of transformation. Enki, the god of waters and wisdom, became a symbol of inner initiation, the descent into the unconscious. Inanna, goddess of love and war, came to represent the dualities within the self and the sacred journey through death and rebirth. Even the Tower of Babel, said to rise in ancient Babylon, was reinterpreted as an occult allegory. Mankind's attempt to reclaim a divine state once lost, possibly under the judgment of the Anunnaki themselves. Mesopotamian temples, including those in Eridu and Uruk, were often constructed on precise astronomical alignments. Some esoteric scholars see in their blueprints sacred geometry, owing the belief that the Anunnaki held the keys to cosmic law. Imagine the ziggurats not just as places of worship, but as machines of spiritual resonance, like tuning forks, struck to harmonize with the frequencies of heaven and earth. Could the Anunnaki have known something, some numerical language or symbolic code that allowed them to channel divine energy into form? We don't know, but many quietly suspect. Alchemists, those elusive seekers of the philosopher's stone, often use strange metaphors: kings and queens merging, dragons devouring the sun, the marriage of fire and water. Some interpretations suggest that the Anunnaki represented the original elements of transmutation. Enlil was the sky volatile, stormy, a masculine force. Enki was water flowing, wise, receptive. Inanna, the soul on its journey through the furnace of transformation. In a way, the Anunnaki were not just beings, but processes, psychological, cosmic, eternal. Another peculiar echo comes from the book of Genesis. There, in chapter 6, we read of the sons of God who came down and mated with the daughters of men, creating the Nephilim giants, heroes, and beings of renown to some esoteric Christians. These sons of God are connected in symbol or spirit to the Anunnaki divine beings who once bridged heaven and earth, but whose fall was tied to hubris, lust, or compassion. Depending on the telling dot, again, the myth is not a map, but a mirror. What do we see in it? Carl Jung once said that myths are expressions of the collective. unconscious the psychological patterns all humans share in this light. The Anunnaki can be seen not as literal sky gods, but as symbols within the human mind. Truth, shadows of ancestral memory, echoes of the great unknown. Their stories may not guide our outer steps today, but they shape our inner architecture. And so, as we dream, as we wonder, as we reach, we sometimes still find ourselves under the silent gaze of gods whose names we barely remember. Somewhere in the desert, beneath ancient stone, the names Enki, Enlil, and Inanna are still waiting. Somewhere in the symbols of modern mysticism, the triangle, the eye, the serpentine glimpse what might be fragments of a language the Anunnaki once spoke, not with words, but with meaning and mystery. In the next and final segment, we descend further not into myth, not into history, but into the realm where belief becomes something personal, something sacred, a space where the Anunnaki, whether gods or metaphors, becomes something very human. Let your breath slow. The story is not over yet. As the last echoes of the ancient ziggurats faded into dust and time, one might assume the story of the Anunnaki ended quietly, like a forgotten hymn. But myths, especially those as powerful as this, have a curious habit of returning dot in the modern world, where ancient symbols flash across digital screens and ancient texts are dissected by hobbyists in dim-lit basements. The Anunnaki have not vanished. They have transformed, re-merged, not as old gods in temples, but as icons of New Age wonder, mystery, and even conspiracy. Let's begin with something you might have heard murmured in documentaries with ominous music, that the Anunnaki were not gods at all, but extraterrestrials. This idea, called the ancient astronaut theory, suggests that the Anunnaki were beings from another world, visitors who came to Earth in the distant past. They descended from the heavens, not on clouds or chariots of fire, but in ships of metal and light. To ancient eyes, they were divine. To modern theorists, they were alien. This theory took root in the 20th century, gaining traction with the writings of Zecharia Sitchin, whose books reinterpreted Sumerian texts in controversial ways. Sitchin believed that the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru, a mysterious, hypothetical world in a long elliptical orbit. According to this idea, they created humans as a labor force, perhaps to mine gold, a metal said to be precious to their civilization. Most scholars reject these claims. The linguistic interpretations are flawed, and the astronomical assumptions are speculative at best. But regardless of factual merit, the theory persists. It feeds something deep and enduring in the human imagination, the longing to be part of a bigger story. even outside of the ancient alien circles. The name Anunnaki has become almost archetypal. It appears in science fiction novels, video, games, and TV shows, where shadowy, godlike figures manipulate civilizations from behind the scenes. They are the mysterious architects of forgotten knowledge, the hidden hand behind history. This isn't so different from their ancient role in Mesopotamia. They determined fates, dictated laws, and gave kings their divine right. Today, they serve as metaphors for unseen power, forgotten wisdom, or even hidden truths. In an age of disillusionment and fractured trust in institutions, the idea of ancient gods who once ruled and may return strikes a chord. It's dramatic, it's unnerving, and it lingers. But if we step back beyond the literal and the speculative, there is another layer, one that ties the Anunnaki not to planets or pyramids, but to the very structure of the human psyche. Carl Jung once wrote of archetypes, symbols, and figures that recur across cultures, encoded deep in the collective unconscious. The father figure, Enlil, the wise but rebellious Enki, the sensual, ambitious Inanna. Each embodies a timeless role, recognizable in myth, literature, and even modern film. To dream of gods is to dream of ourselves amplified, distorted, deified. The persistence of the Anunnaki across time and medium may not point to their physical return, but to their psychological necessity. As long as we seek to understand where we come from, what governs us, and what we might become, we will resurrect these figures again and again. And so, the story of the Anunnaki doesn't end in ancient Sumer, nor in Babylon or Nineveh. It continues whispered in tales of flying discs, hidden planets, and long-lost knowledge. They are remembered not just as gods, but as questions, as possibilities, as shadows cast by a light we can't quite explain. The gods may have walked the earth once, or maybe they never left. But perhaps, just perhaps, they were never gods at all. Just echoes of something we still don't understand. Now, let your eyes rest. Let your breath slow. The stories, like stars, will be here when you wake.